Hey guys, tonight you're stepping into the smoke, sparks, and sheer exhaustion of a medieval blacksmith's life. Before sunrise, your hands are already black with soot, your back aches from the bellows, and somewhere outside the forge, cold rain turns the roads into rivers of mud. You'll spend the day shaping iron beside roaring fire, repairing broken wagon wheels, shoeing nervous horses, and trying not to collapse face first into a bowl of onion stew by midnight. Medieval villagers might call the blacksmith the strongest man in town, but honestly, after 1 week here, you'd probably start bargaining with monks for a quieter life copying books. So, before the hammer starts ringing, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy these slow medieval journeys. Now dim the lights, settle in, and let the forge fire carry you back into the long smoky night of the Middle Ages. Hey guys, tonight you find yourself standing in the bitter dark before dawn, somewhere between a muddy village lane and the low glow of a blacksmith's forge, where smoke hangs beneath soot-black rafters and damp straw clings stubbornly to your boots. The cold settles into everything here. It creeps through wool sleeves, through cracked leather gloves, through the rough planks beneath your feet. Somewhere beyond the misty fields, monastery bells groan softly through the winter air, slow and heavy as if the morning itself is reluctant to arrive. A horse tied near the stable stamps its hoof impatiently, breathing clouds of steam into the pale darkness, while torchlight flickers against wet stone walls slick with river fog. You sleep poorly in places like this, mostly because medieval bedding appears to have been invented by people with a personal grudge against human backs. The straw mattress beneath you smells faintly of damp hay, wood smoke, and perhaps 3 generations of exhausted apprentices. Medieval travel brochures really oversold this experience. Still, there is something strangely comforting about the forge yard before sunrise. The silence feels alive. Somewhere nearby, water drips steadily from a barrel rim. A dog shuffles in its sleep beside the dying embers. You hear the distant creak of cart wheels out on the road long before you ever see them. And honestly, you probably would not last a week out here. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you settle in tonight, feel free to comment your location and local time as well. It is always comforting to know who else is awake beside the fire. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The forge itself sits low beside the riverbank, crouched beneath a crooked roof of darkened shingles patched over many winters. Even now, before proper dawn arrives, the air already carries the faint metallic scent of old iron and wet charcoal. The blacksmith, Master Edric, wakes earlier than nearly anyone in the village. Bakers may rise before sunrise, monks may chant before daylight, but blacksmiths seem to belong to some even older arrangement with exhaustion itself. You lie still for a moment longer beneath your coarse wool blanket, listening to Edric move somewhere outside. His footsteps crunch against frozen mud. Iron tools clink softly together. A bucket scrapes across stone. Then comes the sound everyone in the village knows. The bellows! A long, slow breath pushes into the forge pit with a tired wheeze, followed by the faint crackle of awakening coals. Again the bellows groan. Again the fire answers. Before long, warm orange light begins flickering through the cracks in the workshop shutters. Time moves differently here. No clocks tick upon the walls. Instead, life follows bells, smoke, sunrise, and aching muscles. Some swear old blacksmiths can judge the hour simply by the colour of the forge flame. Others insist the saints themselves protect smithies from complete disaster, which seems optimistic considering how often sparks set things on fire. You finally rise from the straw pallet, joints already stiff from the cold. Your boots wait near the hearth where they dried badly overnight, still damp around the soles. Pulling them on feels less like dressing and more like accepting defeat. Outside, frost silvers the village lane. The mud beneath it remains stubbornly soft, eager to swallow careless footsteps. Thin smoke curls from cottage chimneys one by one as households slowly wake. Somewhere farther uphill, a rooster attempts its duties with very little enthusiasm. Master Edric barely glances toward you as you step into the forge yard. He's already feeding charcoal into the furnace with broad soot-darkened hands. His beard catches sparks constantly, though he behaves as though this is entirely normal. Perhaps it is. "Water bucket," he mutters. You carry it from the well nearby, careful not to slip across the frozen stones. The well rope burns cold against your palms. By the time you return, the forge glows brighter, breathing heat into the bitter morning. Inside the workshop, shadows dance across hanging tools. Hammers line the wall beside iron tongs and bent nails saved for reuse. Nothing here goes to waste, not scraps of iron, not ash, not even broken horseshoes. A medieval blacksmith keeps everything because eventually someone always needs something repaired. The villagers say Edric once reforged an entire cooking pot from old hinge pieces and wagon nails. No one can quite agree whether the story is true, though the pot itself still hangs in the alehouse kitchen with suspiciously uneven sides. You kneel beside the charcoal pile while Edric prepares the morning fire properly. He works without hurry. Blacksmithing is hard labour, but rarely fast labour. Iron punishes impatience. Too cold and it cracks beneath the hammer, too hot and it weakens into uselessness. Every task waits upon the colour of the metal itself. Outside, dawn finally begins creeping across the fields beyond the village palisade. Pale grey light touches frost-covered hedges. A cart rattles somewhere along the distant road toward Market Town. The world wakes slowly here, as though reluctant to leave the warmth of darkness. Edric hands you a chunk of stale bread without looking up. Breakfast. The bread could probably survive a siege. You chew carefully anyway, washing it down with weak ale from a clay cup. Medieval people drink ale constantly, partly because clean water remains unpredictable at the best of times. Even children sip small ale throughout the day, though to be fair, after hauling water buckets beside a forge since before sunrise, you begin understanding the appeal. A few villagers already approach the workshop by the time the sun fully clears the mist. A farmer needs a bent hoe repaired. Another man carries broken iron straps from a grain chest. Everyone needs something eventually. That is the burden of iron. It wears down quietly until one morning it fails all at once. An old woman pauses beside the doorway clutching a bundle of dried herbs. She mutters a blessing toward the forge fire before continuing down the lane. Some villagers believe forge flames frighten away wandering spirits during winter mornings. Others claim blacksmiths themselves possess strange protections because they shape iron with fire, smoke, and hammer blows like lesser magicians. Even now, it is hard to tell whether people fear blacksmiths slightly or simply respect them too much. Perhaps both. The forge grows warmer as the morning deepens. Sweat begins mixing with soot upon your neck despite the cold outside. The steady breathing of the bellows fills the workshop like the lungs of some sleeping beast. Sparks rise upward into the rafters and vanish among old smoke stains. And all the while, beyond the warmth of the forge, monastery bells continue sounding faintly through the winter air, marking the slow passage of another medieval day already heavy with labour. The forge fire strengthens with the morning, growing from a sleepy orange glow into something fierce and living. Heat rolls outward in slow waves, pushing back the damp winter cold that still lingers around the workshop door. Outside, frost clings stubbornly to wagon ruts and roof thatch, but inside the smithy the air already tastes of charcoal, smoke, and hot iron. You quickly learn there is no gentle beginning to a blacksmith's day. Master Edric works the bellows with steady rhythm, each long breath feeding the heart of the fire. The leather folds creak like old ship sails. Ash flutters upward in tiny glowing storms. Your arms begin aching almost immediately from helping him, though you try not to show it. Apprentices complain rarely here, mostly because nobody listens. The forge pit itself resembles a squat stone altar blackened by decades of soot. Clinkers, those ugly lumps of hardened ash and burned impurities, gather beneath the coals and must constantly be scraped aside. Edric mutters whenever he finds too many of them. Apparently blacksmiths reserve a surprising amount of hatred for oddly shaped bits of charcoal waste. You kneel near the hearth with iron tongs while Edric judges the fire by sight alone. The colour matters more than anything. Dark red means stubborn metal. Cherry red softens it. Yellow-white heat approaches danger. Some swear experienced smiths can smell overheated iron before it weakens. Others insist old forge masters learn these things from spirits living inside the coals themselves. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. Outside the open doorway, the village gradually comes alive. A milkmaid crosses the lane carrying sloshing buckets beneath a fur-lined cloak. Somewhere nearby, pigs squeal angrily at being awake. Smoke rises from cottage chimneys into the pale sky, hanging low beneath the morning mist. Inside, the hammering finally begins. Edric draws the first heated rod from the fire, glowing dull orange like trapped sunset beneath ash. He places it upon the anvil with practised calm. Then comes the strike. The sound cracks through the workshop like a church bell, sharp, heavy, final. Again the hammer falls. Again! You feel each impact through the floorboards beneath your boots. Sparks scatter wildly across the packed earth. The iron slowly changes shape beneath measured blows, lengthening little by little. Blacksmithing looks violent from a distance, but up close it feels strangely patient. Each strike serves a purpose. Every turn of the metal matters. Your own task proves far less glorious. Bellows! More bellows. Always bellows. Within minutes your shoulders burn fiercely. Medieval labour seems carefully designed to remind people they possess muscles in deeply unfortunate places. The blacksmith himself barely notices the strain anymore. Years beside the forge have thickened his arms and curved his back slightly forward, as though the work itself slowly bends men toward the earth. Sweat gathers beneath your wool tunic despite the cold season. Soot clings to your sleeves. Your throat tastes faintly of smoke. And still the work continues. A farmer arrives carrying broken plough teeth wrapped in rough cloth. The iron pieces lie twisted and cracked from frozen ground. Winter ruins tools quickly. Edric inspects them silently while chewing the last of his stale bread. No patience, he grunts eventually, though whether he means the farmer or the plough remains unclear. The farmer leaves after promising payment in onions, which seems to satisfy everyone involved. Coins pass through villages like this only occasionally. Most business happens through barter, ironwork exchanged for eggs, hinges traded for sacks of grain, horseshoes paid in smoked fish. Somewhere, somehow, every object becomes currency eventually. You return to sorting scrap iron beside the wall. Bent nails, broken buckles, rusted straps, even cracked cooking hooks. Nothing useful gets thrown away. Iron costs too much effort to waste. Entire journeys are made simply to transport charcoal or bog iron from distant regions. Some villagers whisper that old iron remembers previous shapes. They believe melted horseshoes bring travellers luck, while reforged coffin nails invite illness into homes. A few refuse repaired knives entirely, convinced the metal carries quarrels from former owners. Even now it is hard to tell where superstition ends and caution begins. Near midday, Edric finally allows the fire to settle slightly while you both pause beside the doorway. Fresh air feels startling after hours in the smoke-dark forge. The village lane glistens with thawing frost now turning back into mud. Chickens wander freely between puddles with the confidence of tiny feathered nobles. The same stray dog from earlier has returned. Thin, brown, slightly crooked around one ear. It watches the forge carefully from a safe distance, tail twitching whenever sparks burst from the doorway. Someone once tied a faded bit of blue ribbon around its neck, though the cloth now hangs in dirty threads. Edric tosses it a scrap of gristle. "You feed one," he mutters. "You feed it forever." The dog swallows the scrap immediately and settles beside the wall as though signing some permanent agreement. A church bell sounds faintly across the village. Mid-morning prayers. Time passes strangely in medieval places. Hours are not counted carefully here. Instead, life drifts between bells, meals, weather, and sunlight. A blacksmith measures days by finished tools and cooling ash rather than numbered hours. Soon the forge roars alive once more. This time Edric allows you to hold the hammer. The iron rod glows orange upon the anvil while he positions it carefully with tongs. Your first strike lands awkwardly, glancing sideways with embarrassing weakness. Edric sighs, the sigh of a man who expected disappointment but still hoped slightly otherwise. Again. The second strike lands harder. Then another. The hammer grows heavier each time you lift it. Your wrists tremble from the force rattling back through the handle. Sparks leap upward around your hands. The iron slowly flattens beneath repeated blows, though far less gracefully than under Edric's practiced rhythm. Still, something satisfying lives inside the motion. Lift, strike, turn, strike again. Simple. Exhausting. Endless. Outside, clouds begin thickening across the pale winter sky. The wind shifts colder through cracks in the workshop walls. Somewhere farther down the road, a cartwheel squeals loudly enough to suggest future business for the forge. Edric notices it too. Broken axle soon, he predicts calmly. You're beginning to understand that blacksmiths view the world differently from everyone else. Most people see horses, wagons, doors, ploughs, locks, knives, nails, and tools. Blacksmiths see future repairs. By the time the bell for midday prayers sounds from the distant monastery, your arms ache so badly you can barely flex your fingers properly. Soot darkens your face. Tiny burns sting across your wrists where sparks landed unnoticed. And yet the forge still breathes steadily behind you, hungry for more charcoal, more iron, more labour. The day has barely begun. By the time the monastery bells fade into the grey midday air, the forge has settled into its relentless rhythm. Heat pulses from the fire in steady breaths, while smoke drifts lazily among the rafters overhead. Your shoulders ache from the hammer. Your hands smell permanently of soot and iron. Even the inside of your nose seems lined with charcoal now. And still villagers continue arriving. The manor steward appears shortly after noon, wrapped in a dark wool cloak trimmed with damp fur. He ducks beneath the workshop doorway with all the cheerfulness of a tax collector approaching a wedding feast. Two servants follow behind him, carrying bundled iron straps and a cracked hinge larger than your forearm. The stray dog beside the forge immediately growls, which honestly feels like good judgment. The steward introduces himself again despite everyone already knowing who he is. Men connected to manor courts enjoy introductions almost as much as monks enjoy long prayers, and geese enjoy biting innocent travellers. "Master Edric," he says stiffly, brushing mud from his gloves. "The north granary requires repairs before the next snow." Edric barely glances up from the anvil. Then perhaps the north granary should have broken earlier. The steward does not laugh. The dog, however, sneezes directly onto one servant's boot, which improves the mood slightly. You help unload the damaged ironwork onto a scarred oak bench near the forge wall. Hinges bent from damp swelling wood, rusted straps from storage chests, a cluster of square nails pulled loose from warped beams. Winter destroys things patiently here. Cold seeps into iron, wood, stone, and bone alike until something finally gives way. The steward produces a tally stick from his sleeve and begins discussing payment in the careful tone of a man who distrusts every coin leaving his purse. Tally sticks serve as records of debt and agreement throughout much of the countryside. One piece remains with the manor. The matching half stays with the craftsman. Crude cuts carved into the woodmark values owed. No one can quite agree whether tally sticks prevent cheating or merely create more complicated cheating. While Edric negotiates, you carry fresh charcoal from the storage lean-to behind the forge. The air outside feels damp and heavy now. Clouds gather thickly over the village roofs, turning the afternoon dim as early dusk. Somewhere beyond the muddy lane, you hear crows quarrelling noisily over something unpleasant in a frozen field. Inside the workshop, the steward continues complaining. The granary doors stick. The hinge has grown terribly. And the lock no longer catches properly. At this, Edric finally pauses. A lock that complains in winter is still a lock, he says. A silent lock is usually missing. The steward stares blankly for a moment before realizing this counts as humour. You think, possibly. Medieval jokes often arrive disguised as warnings. The forge fire crackles louder as fresh charcoal catches. You pump the bellows carefully while Edric examines the damaged hinge. His thick fingers trace rust along the edges. Iron corrodes quickly in wet, cold weather, especially near storehouses where damp grain and thawing mud constantly linger. Some villagers hang dried herbs above granary doors to protect food stores from rot. Others nail horseshoes upside down nearby, believing they spill bad fortune onto thieves entering after dark. A few insist saints' relics hidden beneath floorboards keep rats away, though the rats themselves appear unconvinced. The steward lowers his voice while Edric heats the hinge. "There are whispers," he mutters, "about grain spoiling too quickly this winter. There are always whispers. A widow near the south field claims she saw blue lights moving beside the granary after midnight." Edric snorts softly. "Blue lights are marsh gas. Some swear they are spirits. Spirits don't steal oats." The steward seems unsatisfied by this explanation, though he nods anyway. Medieval life contains a curious balance between practical labour and constant superstition. People trust iron locks, but they also trust charms carved into door frames. They repair roofs carefully while still hanging blessed herbs from rafters against unseen dangers. Even now, it is hard to tell which customs comfort people most. You hold the glowing hinge steady with tongs while Edric hammers it flat again upon the anvil. The metal sparks brightly beneath each blow. Nearby, one servant warms his hands too close to the forge and nearly singes his sleeve. The dog watches this with quiet approval. Outside, cold rain finally begins tapping against the roof. At first it sounds soft. then heavier. Soon water trickles steadily through familiar leaks into waiting buckets positioned around the workshop floor. No building here entirely defeats winter weather. Stone sweats moisture, wood swells, roofs drip constantly. Entire medieval villages seem held together through stubbornness and damp wool. The steward grimaces toward the rain. Roads will worsen by evening. Roads are worse every evening, Edric replies. You suspect this may also qualify as humour. Work continues despite the weather. Iron straps return to the fire one by one. Nails are sorted into useful piles. Edric shapes replacement pins for the granary lock while explaining little and expecting much. His instructions arrive mostly as grunts, gestures, or irritated eyebrow movements. Somehow you begin understanding them anyway. The heat grows thick and exhausting inside the smithy while rain chills the world beyond the doorway. Steam rises faintly from damp cloaks hung near the hearth. Your tunic sticks uncomfortably to your back beneath layers of soot. A young boy arrives carrying a basket covered with cloth. Payment from the manor. Inside waits coarse bread, smoked fish, onions, and a small wedge of pale cheese already sweating near the fire. The steward leaves immediately afterward, eager to outrun worsening roads before dark. The servants follow. The dog follows them hopefully. The dog returns disappointed. You and Edric finally eat in relative silence beside the forge while rain rattles steadily overhead. The smoked fish tastes heavily salted and slightly suspicious around the edges, though hunger makes nearly everything acceptable after hours beside the fire. Edric tears bread apart with soot-dark fingers. Tomorrow, he says eventually, the manor will discover 3 more broken things. You glance toward the repaired hinges cooling nearby. How do you know? He shrugs. Because winter always wins eventually. Outside, rainwater snakes through muddy wagon ruts beyond the workshop. Villagers hurry along the lane beneath cloaks and hoods, while distant monastery bells drift faintly through the weather. The forge glows warm against the darkening afternoon like a stubborn little sun refusing surrender. And around you, beneath soot-black beams and flickering firelight, the exhausting rhythm of the blacksmith's world simply carries on. The rain lingers through the afternoon, soft at first and then steady enough to turn the village lane into a long ribbon of brown mud. Water drips endlessly from the forge roof into crooked barrels already half full. The cold outside deepens with every passing hour, though inside the workshop the fire still breathes its heavy warmth against your face. After the manor steward finally disappears into the wet grey distance, the forge grows quieter for a little while. Not silent. A medieval forge is never truly silent. Iron ticks softly as it cools. Coals settle with faint cracking sounds. Rain taps the shutters. Somewhere overhead, wind nudges the loose roof boards with sleepy creaks. But quieter. Master Edric uses the lull to sort tools along the wall while you scrape ash from beneath the hearth. The work feels endless and oddly calming at the same time. Soot stains your hands black clear up to the wrists. Fine grey dust settles into every fold of your sleeves. The stray dog has returned again. It curls near the warm stones beside the forge pit, sighing deeply as though it has spent the entire day labouring beside you, rather than sleeping through most of it. Its damp fur smells faintly of wet leaves and muddy roads. You've adopted each other now, Edric mutters. The dog opens one eye briefly, unconcerned. At last Edric decides the fire can rest for a short while. Not die completely, never that, but settle low enough for a meal. He hangs an iron pot above the coals while you fetch water from the barrel near the doorway. The water tastes faintly of smoke. Everything tastes faintly of smoke here. Soon, onions, cabbage, and scraps of barley simmer together into a thick pottage whose appearance does not inspire confidence. Medieval meals often resemble experiments conducted during difficult weather. Still, the smell filling the workshop grows rich and comforting after a long morning of charcoal and hot iron. You carry rough wooden trenchers from a shelf beside the wall. The bread from the manor sits nearby, wrapped in cloth now damp from the rain-heavy air. Edric cuts it with a knife so worn its handle shines smooth as polished bone. The workshop darkens steadily while you eat. Outside, villagers hurry homeward beneath cloaks slick with rain. A woman carrying rushes for her floor nearly slips in the mud beside the lane. 2 boys splash through puddles despite shouted warnings from somewhere unseen. Farther uphill, thin smoke drifts from cottage chimneys into the dim afternoon sky. Inside the forge, the warmth settles heavily around you both. The pottage tastes simple but filling. Barley, onion, a little cabbage, tiny bits of salted pork floating like rare treasure. Medieval people build entire lives around surviving winter meals like this. There are no delicate spices here, no elegant sauces, no polished silver platters, just heat, salt, bread hard enough to defend a castle wall, and enough food to keep tomorrow's labour possible. Edric drinks slowly from a clay cup of ale while rainwater trickles steadily down the shutters beside him. "Winter's early," he says. You nod, though in truth every medieval winter probably feels early when you work beside a forge from darkness to darkness. For a time, neither of you speaks much. The dog shifts closer to the fire. Steam rises faintly from drying cloaks hung near the hearth. Somewhere nearby, a cart rattles through deep mud with miserable determination. Then voices sound outside. 2 villagers duck into the workshop carrying bundles wrapped in wool cloth. One woman cradles her hand carefully against her chest, while an older man carries a sack smelling strongly of the herbs. "Master Edric," the old man says, removing his hood. "We need the iron warmed." Edric sighs quietly. You realise with some concern that this sentence apparently makes perfect sense to everyone except you. The woman unwraps her hand slowly. One finger has swollen badly around a bent iron ring she can no longer remove. Her knuckle looks angry and red beneath the firelight. "Blacksmith's hands," the old man mutters sympathetically. "Iron holds tighter in cold weather." Edric gestures toward the forge. "Sit." You soon learn that village blacksmiths serve many strange duties beyond hammering horseshoes and wagon parts. People come seeking nails, locks, repairs, advice, and sometimes odd little remedies no one else quite trusts themselves to attempt. Edric heats a small iron tool carefully in the coals while the woman waits nervously. The old man empties dried herbs onto the table nearby rosemary, yarrow, and something bitter smelling you cannot identify. Some swear heated iron drives sickness from swollen joints. Others believe blacksmith fires carry hidden blessings because iron itself frightens evil spirits. No one can quite agree whether these remedies work from skill, faith, or simple desperation. Perhaps all 3. Edric finally grips the ring gently with heated tongs and eases it loose before the swelling worsens further. The woman exhales in relief immediately. The old man presses a small beeswax candle into Edric's hand as payment. A fine one too. Beeswax candles cost far more than ordinary tallow because they burn cleaner and sweeter. Monasteries prize them especially. Wealthier households save them for feast days or prayers. In poorer cottages, people mostly endure the smell of smoking animal fat instead. The candle's faint honey scent drifts pleasantly through the forge after the visitors leave. Outside, the rain finally begins easing toward evening drizzle. Distant bells ring softly from the monastery again, their sound blurred by mist and wet air. Time for vespers. The sky beyond the doorway darkens toward blue-grey dusk. You help stack fresh charcoal beside the hearth, while Edric sharpens tools beneath fading light. The workshop settles into a quieter rhythm now, less hammering, more waiting, more listening. Somewhere out along the road, travellers will already be searching for shelter before full nightfall. Inns fill quickly during bad weather. Monastery guest houses too. A cold, wet road after dark can turn dangerous in ways city folk rarely imagine. Even now, it is hard to tell whether wolves, thieves, sickness, or simple freezing claims more travellers during winter journeys. The forge fire crackles softly beside you. The dog snores. Rainwater drips steadily from the eaves outside. And for a little while, wrapped in warmth, smoke, and the slow comfort of shared food, the exhausting world beyond the workshop walls feels very far away indeed. The rain finally weakens into mist by late afternoon, though the world outside the forge remains soaked through with winter damp. Water clings to every fence rail and roof edge. Mud swallows boots greedily along the village lane. The cold carries that particular smell of wet earth and distant smoke that seems to belong only to old places and hard seasons. You are beginning to think the forge might enjoy trapping people inside it forever. Unfortunately, the cartwheel arrives. You hear it before you see it, a long, miserable squealing somewhere beyond the village cottages, followed by the uneven clatter of wood striking stone. Even the dog lifts its head immediately, already suspicious. Master Edric glances toward the doorway without surprise. "Axel," he says simply. A moment later, a heavily loaded cart lurches into view through the mist. One wheel leans badly sideways while the entire wagon groans like an exhausted animal nearing collapse. The horse pulling it looks personally offended by the situation. The carter himself appears no happier. He wears a soaked wool hood and a beard full of rainwater. Mud coats him nearly to the knees. One mitten hangs from his belt, stiff with drying filth. "Wheels failing," he announces unnecessarily as he drags the cart toward the forge yard. "You drove it half broken already," Edric replies. The man shrugs in the universal language of desperate travellers everywhere. Road doesn't repair itself. That, unfortunately, is true. You step outside into the cold drizzle to help guide the cart beneath the lean shelter beside the forge. The mud nearly steals one boot entirely. Medieval roads are less roads and more ongoing disagreements between humans and weather. Stone causeways exist near wealthier towns, but most countryside tracks dissolve into deep ruts and puddles every winter. Some swear Roman roads farther south remain smoother than anything built since. Others insist this is merely the kind of story old travellers invent after too much ale. The damaged wheel looks miserable up close. One iron rim strap has loosened while part of the wooden spoke assembly cracked under strain. The entire thing wobbles dangerously whenever the cart shifts weight. The carter jumps down stiffly from the bench seat. "Need it by dark," he says. Edric stares at him for a very long moment. "Then you should have broken it yesterday." Again, it is difficult to tell where medieval humour ends and irritation begins. The horse snorts steam into the cold air while you begin unloading sacks from the cart to lighten the wheel. Grain mostly, a few barrels too. The smell of wet hemp rope and soaked wood fills the forge yard. Nearby stands a small roadside shrine half hidden beneath dripping ivy. You noticed it earlier but paid little attention at the time. A tiny painted saint peers out from beneath a warped wooden roof blackened by weather and candle smoke. Someone recently left winter berries there despite the rain. The carter crosses himself quickly while passing it. "Bad stretch of road near the marsh," he mutters quietly. Edric grunts. "No worse than usual." The carter lowers his voice further anyway. "Some swear lantern lights move there after dusk." Lantern lights are travellers. Not if they float. Edric lifts the broken wheel slightly and inspects the iron band. Then they're wet travellers. You nearly laugh aloud. The carter does not. No one can quite agree whether marsh lights are spirits, wandering souls, swamp gas, or simply drunk pilgrims falling into ditches with candles. Medieval people maintain a healthy respect for all possibilities at once. You help remove the damaged wheel while Edric heats iron braces inside the forge. The work quickly becomes filthy. Mud splashes your leggings. Wet wood splinters beneath your fingers. One barrel nearly rolls loose downhill before the dog barks furiously enough to stop everyone in panic. The dog then looks extremely proud of itself. Inside the workshop, the forge roars hotter once more as evening deepens outside. Steam rises from the soaked wheel rim while Edric reheats the iron band meant to tighten around the wooden frame. Wheel-making itself belongs mostly to wheelwrights, but blacksmiths handle the iron fittings that hold everything together. Without iron bands, medieval wagons would simply shake themselves apart across the roads within days. Honestly, many still do. You pump the bellows while Edric heats the circular rim until it glows dull red beneath the soot. Sparks scatter upward in glowing spirals. The workshop grows thick with heat again despite the cold weather pressing at the walls outside. Then comes the difficult part. The heated iron band must fit tightly around the repaired wheel before cooling shrinks it firmly into place. Too loose and the wheel fails again. Too tight and the wood cracks under pressure. The carter watches nervously while Edric positions the glowing rim. "Water," Edric snaps. You throw buckets across the wheel immediately. Steam erupts violently upward, filling the forge yard in hissing white clouds. The horse jerks sideways in alarm. The dog flees beneath a barrel. The smell of hot wet wood floods the air. For a few moments the entire world seems made of steam and hammer blows. Then slowly it settles. The iron cools. The wheel holds. The carter exhales with visible relief. "Saints preserve us," he mutters. "Mostly iron preserves you," Edric says. "Even now." It is hard to tell whether blacksmiths consider themselves craftsmen or reluctant opponents in an endless war against broken things. Perhaps both. Darkness thickens steadily outside the forge. Mist drifts across the lane beneath fading blue evening light. Somewhere far off, monastery bells ring again through the wet, cold air. The repaired wheel creaks properly now instead of screaming in protest. The carter reloads his sacks while muttering thanks. He pays partly in dried apples and partly in 2 small silver coins worn nearly smooth from years of use. Before leaving, he hangs a tiny carved charm near the cart seat, a crude little wooden wheel marked with crossed lines. For road luck, he explains. Edric says nothing until the wagon disappears into the misty dusk. Then quietly, "Road luck is slower horses." The dog returns cautiously from hiding. The forge fire crackles behind you. Mud clings heavily to your boots. And somewhere beyond the dark fields and dripping hedgerows, the repaired cart rattles onward into the long medieval evening. By the time the cart disappears fully into the evening mist, the village itself has begun preparing for night, shutters close against the cold. Smoke thickens above cottage roofs. Lantern light flickers faintly behind stretched parchment windows, where families gather around hearths and bowls of steaming pottage. But the forge remains awake. It always remains awake a little longer than the rest of the village. The repaired wheel still ticks softly as cooling iron settles into the wood. Your sleeves smell strongly of wet steam and charcoal now. Mud cakes thick around your boots hard enough to feel like extra layers of leather. Master Edric stretches his shoulders once beside the anvil, producing several alarming cracks from his back. "Market tomorrow," he mutters. as though this explains the exhaustion already waiting for you. And unfortunately, it does. The weekly market in the nearby town draws farmers, traders, pilgrims, peddlers, drovers, tinkers, monks, and thieves from miles around, which also means broken buckles, lame horses, loose wagon rims, snapped knives, cracked locks, bent nails, and countless other opportunities for the forge to remain miserable from sunrise onward. You help prepare iron stock for the journey while dusk settles deeper outside. Bundles of nails are tied neatly in cloth, horseshoe blanks are stacked beside the cart, spare straps, hinges, rivets, and hooks disappear into wooden crates blackened by years of soot. The dog watches everything carefully, perhaps worried you might accidentally organize food instead. Outside, cold mist creeps low across the fields beyond the village palisade. The muddy road toward town reflects the last traces of fading sky like strips of dark water, somewhere nearby. A church bell rings slow evening prayers while crows settle noisily into bare winter trees. You eventually leave the warmth of the forge to help harness the old mule pulling Edric's wagon. The animal greets you with the enthusiasm of a tax-paying citizen summoned to unpleasant labour. Its breath steams heavily in the dark. "Mean creature," Edric says. The mule immediately attempts to bite his sleeve. Some relationships simply mature beautifully over time. At last the wagon rattles onto the road leading toward the market town. Lantern light swings beneath the cart with each bump and rut. You walk beside the wheels while Edric guides the mule through deep mud shining faintly beneath moonlit mist. The night air feels sharp after the forge heat. Every breath tastes of wet earth, smoke, and distant frost. Road travel after dark carries risks here. Potholes vanish beneath puddles. Wagon axles snap unexpectedly. Travellers lose paths in fog. Some swear bandits still haunt the old forest road beyond the abbey ruins, though others claim the only robbers left there are hungry monks collecting suspiciously generous bridge tolls. No one can quite agree. The road winds slowly between hedgerows silvered by lingering rain. Occasionally you pass roadside shrines tucked beneath old oak trees, their tiny candles flickering against damp stone saints. Travellers leave coins, ribbons, bits of bread, or carved charms there for protection during journeys. One shrine displays dozens of tiny iron nails hammered into the wood nearby. "Blacksmith offerings," Edric explains quietly, "for safe wheels." You nod solemnly despite not fully understanding why nails specifically comfort medieval travellers. Then again, after today's cart repair, perhaps they should. The market town finally emerges through the mist near full dark. High timber walls loom above muddy ditches. Torchlight burns beside the gatehouse where sleepy guards inspect arriving wagons with varying levels of interest. The smell reaches you first. Wet horses, smoke, ale, fish, human crowds, and somewhere beneath it all, the warm smell of baking bread drifting from nearby ovens. After hours on muddy roads, the town feels strangely alive despite the cold. Merchants still shout while unloading crates beneath lanterns. Pilgrims wrapped in cloaks cluster around cook fires near the gate. A peddler drags squealing geese through the crowd while apologizing to nobody. You and Edric guide the wagon toward the market square where blacksmiths traditionally work during trading days. The square itself lies uneven beneath layers of churned mud, trampled rushes, and old straw scattered to absorb filth with limited success. Medieval towns possess many smells. Few are humble about it. You help erect a simple awning beside the wagon while Edric arranges tools beneath lantern light. Nearby, another smith already hammers horseshoes beside a portable forge, glowing orange against the darkness. Soon customers begin arriving almost immediately. A rider needs new shoes fitted before continuing north. A merchant complains about loose rivets on a chest lock. One nervous pilgrim requests a replacement buckle after a snapped crossing a flooded stream earlier that morning. The work never truly stops. You hold horses steady while Edric works quickly beneath torchlight. The smell of hot hoof mingles strangely with rain-soaked leather and forge smoke. Horses stamp nervously whenever sparks fly. One grey mare attempts to sit down entirely rather than cooperate. Edric mutters darkly beneath his breath. Animals cursed. The horse sneezes directly onto his cloak. Now definitely cursed. Evening deepens around the market square while traders settle into temporary camps. Smoke rises from roasting fires. Somewhere nearby, musicians attempt cheerful songs despite freezing fingers and questionable talent. A nearby fish seller loudly advertises eels of deeply suspicious freshness. The dog, naturally, disappears toward that direction immediately. You finally pause beside the wagon long enough to drink warm ale from a clay cup. The liquid tastes smoky and slightly sour, but wonderfully hot against the cold air. Nearby, pilgrims wrapped in patched cloaks display tiny lead badges pinned to their sleeves, relics from distant shrines and holy sites. Some swear certain pilgrim badges protect travelers from sickness. Others insist counterfeit badges outnumber real blessings 10-1. Medieval commerce rarely misses an opportunity. Across the square, a woman burns herbs in a shallow iron bowl while murmuring prayers against winter fevers. The smoke drifts sweet and bitter together through the crowd. Even now, it's hard to tell whether medieval towns survive through faith, trade, stubbornness, or sheer exhaustion. Probably all four. The monastery bells ring once more beyond the town rooftops, low and distant through the misty night. The forge beside you glows steadily beneath drifting smoke, and around the crowded market square, the long exhausting rhythm of iron, mud, horses, and weary travellers carries onward into darkness. The market square slowly empties as night deepens. Though empty in a medieval town still means shouting somewhere, coughing somewhere else, and at least one drunk man singing to a horse. The mist thickens between the timber buildings until lantern light glows soft and blurry along the muddy streets. Your arms feel heavy now from hours beside the portable forge. Even holding the ale cup earlier seemed briefly ambitious. Still, work continues. It always continues. A cold drizzle begins again near midnight, fine as smoke at first, then steady enough to send merchants scrambling beneath awnings and patched canvas shelters. Market folk curse quietly while gathering goods away from the weather. Pilgrims huddle closer beside cook fires. Somewhere nearby, a goose escapes and immediately improves nobody's evening. Edric grunts toward the sky. Rain follows markets, he says. You suspect rain follows everything here eventually. The portable forge hisses softly whenever droplets strike hot iron. Steam curls upward into the damp night air. Your clothes now carry 3 separate kinds of smoke-scent charcoal, wet wood, and tallow lanterns layered together so completely you may never smell normal again. A town guard approaches through the drizzle wearing a kettle helmet shiny with rainwater. His cloak hangs soaked and heavy around his shoulders. One iron keyring dangles from his belt, clattering loudly with every step. Gatehouse lock, he says, frozen again. Edric sighs deeply enough to suggest this problem has become personal. You follow the guard through narrow streets slick with mud and scattered rushes. Medieval towns spread unevenly, built more from habit than planning. Houses lean overhead at strange angles. Water drips constantly from gutters and roof beams. Candlelight flickers behind shutters while somewhere unseen a baby cries briefly before quieting again. The guard carries a horn lantern ahead of you, its dim flame wobbling across puddles and stone walls. "Cold gets into everything," he mutters. He is not wrong. The gatehouse looms beside the town wall, squat and damp beneath torchlight. Rainwater runs down the old stone in shining streams. Two sleepy watchmen linger beneath the archway, warming hands over a brazier filled with glowing coals. The smell here is a mixture of wet wool, smoke, and old straw. Honestly, most medieval buildings smell like they were assembled entirely from damp fabric and disappointment. The gate lock itself hangs stiff beside the heavy oak doors, its iron casing rimmed with frost despite the rain. One watchman spits thoughtfully into the mud. "Needs a blessing," he says. "Needs oil," Edric replies. The watchman shrugs as though both solutions seem equally reasonable. You kneel beside the lock holding the lantern while Edric works carefully with small tools from his belt pouch. His fingers move slowly, scraping ice and grit from the mechanism. The lock clicks stubbornly, but refuses fully to turn. One guard leans closer. "My uncle swore frozen locks mean spirits nearby." "Your uncle probably owed money," Edric mutters. The guard considers this. Also true. Some swear iron keys protect homes from wandering dead if hung beside beds during winter storms. Others nail old locks above stable doors to frighten witches away from livestock. A few people even sleep with keys beneath pillows, believing they prevent nightmares. Even now, it's hard to tell whether medieval life runs on practical repairs or quiet fear. Perhaps people need both. Rain taps steadily against the gatehouse roof while Edric warms the lock mechanism carefully over a small coal pan. Steam rises faintly from the iron. The watchmen huddle deeper into cloaks nearby, muttering about weather, taxes, and suspicious travellers from the southern road. One mentions hearing strange singing near the marsh outside town. "Pilgrims," another says. Sounded wrong. Then drunk pilgrims. That explanation satisfies everyone immediately. At last the lock finally turns with a heavy clunk loud enough to echo beneath the stone archway. The guards visibly relax. One presses a tiny cloth charm into Edric's hand, blue thread wrapped around dried herbs and tied with a copper pin. "For rust luck," the guard explains. Edric stares at it. Rust doesn't care about thread. Maybe not, but my wife does. To your surprise, Edric pockets the charm anyway. The drizzle worsens as you leave the gatehouse. Cold water slips steadily down your collar now despite the hood. Streets shine black beneath lantern reflections. Somewhere across town, monastery bells ring softly for late prayers, their sound drifting through mist and chimney smoke alike. On the walk back toward the market square, you pass beneath an archway crowded with faded charms nailed into the timber beams overhead. Tiny carved saints, bent nails, knotted cords, wax seals pressed with holy symbols. Travellers touch them while passing beneath. Good fortune remains a serious business on dangerous roads. A woman hurries by clutching onions and coarse bread beneath her cloak. Two monks move silently through the rain, carrying lanterns towards some unseen errand. Farther ahead, an old beggar sleeps wrapped in burlap beside a bakery wall where warmth leaks faintly through the stones. The smell of fresh bread nearly stops you walking, Edric notices. "Too late for buying," he says. The bakery shutters are indeed already closed. A tragedy. You return eventually to the forge shelter, where the portable coals still glow dimly beneath the awning. The dog lies curled beside them, somehow completely dry despite the weather, which feels mildly supernatural. Nearby merchants sleep beneath wagons wrapped in wool blankets while rain drums softly overhead. A few lanterns continue burning across the square, their weak golden light barely touching the surrounding darkness. Edric settles onto a crate beside the forge with a long, tired exhale. No speech, no complaints, just exhaustion settling into old bones after another day of iron and cold weather. You sit nearby listening to rainwater drip from awnings and cartwheels into the muddy square below. The portable forge crackles softly beside you. Steam rises faintly from damp cloaks drying near the embers. And beyond the town walls, hidden somewhere in the darkness and marsh fog, the long medieval roads wait patiently for morning. Morning arrives slowly beneath low grey clouds and the lingering smell of wet ashes. You wake stiff beneath a rough wool blanket thrown over sacks beside the market forge. The square around you already murmurs with early activity despite the weak light. Somewhere nearby, merchants argue over cart space before sunrise with remarkable dedication. A mule complains loudly. A rooster attempts optimism and fails. The portable forge beside you has cooled to dull red embers overnight, though warmth still lingers faintly in the stones. The dog sleeps curled tightly against the remaining heat, twitching occasionally as though dreaming of sausages or smaller dogs to insult. Cold mist hangs low between the buildings while monastery bells roll softly through the town beyond the market walls. Prime prayers. Another day beginning. Your back feels as though someone spent the night quietly replacing your spine with firewood. Edric is already awake. Of course he is. The man appears incapable of sleeping past dawn even accidentally. He crouches beside the forge, coaxing fresh charcoal into flame, while rainwater drips steadily from the awning overhead. "Monastery today," he mutters. You nod automatically, despite still being half asleep. Only after several moments do you fully process what he said. The monastery workshop sits uphill beyond the town's eastern gate, attached to a sprawling stone abbey older than nearly everything surrounding it. Monks commission ironwork constantly hinges, locks, candle holders, bells, gate fittings, lamp hooks, chest straps, window grills. Apparently even holy men cannot escape broken hardware. You swallow cold bread left over from last night while Edric prepares a crate of repaired fittings wrapped carefully in cloth. Beeswax candles from the forge shelf join the load as well, their faint honey scent drifting pleasantly through the damp air. The dog wakes immediately upon hearing bread, a professional instinct. Soon you climb the steep, muddy road toward the abbey, while morning fog curls through the streets behind you. The town slowly stirs awake below. Chimney smoke rises pale against the clouds. Traders shout across the market square. Somewhere a blacksmith hammer already rings faintly through the cold air like a distant bell. The monastery appears gradually through the mist ahead. Tall stone walls, narrow windows, dark slate roofs shining with rain. The place feels less built than grown from the hillside itself. Ivy clings thickly across sections of ancient stonework, while thin streams of water trickle endlessly from gargoyle spouts into mossy basins below. A bell tolls overhead as you approach the gate. Deep, slow, heavy enough to settle inside your chest. Two lay brothers admit you through the outer gatehouse where rushes cover damp stone floors beneath arching beams blackened by centuries of smoke. The entire abbey smells faintly of candle wax, wet wool, old books, and soup. An unexpectedly scholarly combination. Inside the courtyard, monks cross silently beneath covered walkways carrying baskets, firewood, scrolls, and lanterns. Their robes brush softly against wet stones. Somewhere unseen, chanting echoes low through the halls like distant wind. No one moves quickly here. Not even time itself. You follow Edric toward the monastery workshop near the rear cloister, where a thin monk waits beside stacks of damaged iron fittings. His fingers are stained heavily with ink despite the early hour. A scribe, clearly. "Master Edric," he says quietly, The west passage door still drags badly. Then the door is older than the wall. The monk actually smiles faintly at this. Progress. Inside the workshop, the air feels warmer than outside but carries the dense smell of parchment, oil lamps, and damp stone. Shelves overflow with tools, beeswax, rolled manuscripts, candle moulds, and bundles of herbs hanging upside down from ceiling beams. A young novice copies text nearby with painstaking concentration, while holding his tongue slightly out the corner of his mouth. Ink stains cover nearly everything within reach. Some swear monastery scribes go blind from working too long by candlelight. Others claim certain monks secretly preserve forbidden books chained beneath abbey libraries. A few villagers insist monks know hidden prayers capable of stopping storms or curing fevers if properly spoken beside saints' relics. No one can quite agree which stories are true. The abbey certainly encourages the mystery. Edric begins examining damaged hinges laid across the bench while you unload the repaired fittings from the cart. Large iron candle holders, reinforced chest straps, door pins blackened smooth from use. The scribe monk inspects each piece carefully. "Good work," he murmurs. Edric grunts politely, which for him practically counts as gratitude. The novice nearby accidentally splatters ink across his sleeve and looks briefly horrified, as though he has personally insulted heaven. "Relax," the scribe says calmly. "St. Jerome spilled ink too." No, he didn't. No one can prove otherwise. The novice considers this carefully. You like the scribe already. Rain taps softly against the leaded windows while monastery life unfolds around you in quiet rhythms. Bells ring for prayers somewhere deeper in the abbey. Sandaled footsteps whisper through hallways. A distant kitchen smells strongly of the onions and fresh bread. Very fresh bread. Cruelly fresh bread. The monks offer warmed ale and small trenchers while Edric repairs the dragging door hinge in the west corridor. You carry tools behind him through dim passageways lit by beeswax candles whose golden light flickers gently against damp stone walls. The abbey feels endless inside. Hallways twist unexpectedly. Staircases vanish into shadow. Small shrines appear in alcoves glowing beside tiny relic boxes decorated with silver and enamel. One shrine contains what monks claim is a finger bone from a saint, who supposedly survived freezing 3 separate times during winter pilgrimages. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval relics inspire faith because people believe the stories or because they desperately want the stories to be true. Perhaps belief itself becomes warmth in cold places. The damaged hinge finally yields after much scraping, hammering, and muttered complaints from Edric directed mostly toward the original carpenter, dead several decades now, but apparently still disappointing people. The heavy oak door swings smoothly once more. The scribe monk nods approvingly. "God rewards patient labour," he says. Edric wipes soot from his beard. "God should try lifting the hinge side next time." The monk laughs unexpectedly loudly. Somewhere nearby, bells begin ringing again through the abbey halls. The candles flicker softly. Rain drifts against the windows. And deep within the warm stone monastery, surrounded by old prayers, iron fittings, and the slow breath of medieval life, another exhausting day quietly carries onward. The monastery bells continue ringing long after the repaired door finally settles properly upon its hinges. Their sound drifts through the abbey halls in slow waves, echoing faintly from wet stone and vaulted ceilings, until it becomes difficult to tell where the bells end and the silence begins. You leave the monastery sometime near midday beneath a sky the colour of old pewter. Mist clings low across the hillside while cold rain threatens again without fully committing itself. The town below looks soft and blurred beneath chimney smoke and drifting fog. The dog, somehow, has followed you all the way to the abbey gates. No one remembers inviting it. It trots ahead proudly as though personally responsible for monastery repairs. Edric reloads the cart while muttering about loose roads and expensive charcoal. The monks provide payment partly in coin and partly in supplies candles, smoked fish, and 2 sacks of charcoal wrapped carefully against the damp. A useful arrangement. You begin the slow descent back toward the market square through slick, muddy streets crowded now with daytime trade. Merchants shout prices beneath canvas awnings. Children weave between carts carrying baskets larger than themselves. Somewhere nearby, someone roasts chestnuts over coals, filling the air with warm, sweet smoke. And beneath all of it comes the familiar sound again. Hammering. Another forge somewhere across town. The rhythm follows you through the streets like a second heartbeat. Back at the market square, the portable forge already glows hot once more. Another long line of repairs waits nearby as though broken objects multiply overnight when nobody watches them. A cooper needs iron hoops tightened around leaking barrels. A butcher brings 2 bent meat hooks. One anxious rider arrives clutching a snapped stirrup strap while insisting he must leave before sunset. Everyone always must leave before sunset. Medieval travel apparently operates entirely on urgency and poor planning. You pump the bellows while Edric reheats iron bands for the cooper's barrels. Heat blasts outward from the forge despite the cold weather, drying your sleeves in patches while leaving your boots thoroughly soaked. The square smells of rain, livestock, smoke, fish, and humanity in all its determined medieval glory. Nearby, a woman sells hot onion broth from an iron cauldron suspended over coals. Traders cluster around it gratefully beneath dripping cloaks. A group of pilgrims huddle near a shrine pole covered in faded ribbons and tiny nailed charms. Some swear travellers who circle the shrine 3 times avoid robbery on the road ahead. Others claim thieves themselves started the tradition centuries ago to distract pilgrims while pockets were picked. Honestly, either explanation feels believable. The cooper's barrels hiss loudly when the heated iron hoops slide back into place. Steam rises from the damp wood while Edric checks the fit with quick practiced taps from a small hammer. Good enough, he says. The cooper nods solemnly, as though receiving wisdom from a battlefield commander. You notice how people watch blacksmiths carefully. Not with fear exactly, but with a kind of respect reserved for dangerous practical knowledge. Fire and iron remain slightly mysterious to most villagers. The forge transforms ugly raw metal into nails, locks, blades, hinges, horseshoes, cooking hooks, lantern chains, tools. Almost every useful object passes through blackened hands eventually. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval people admire blacksmiths most for their skill or because they survive daily beside fire hot enough to melt iron itself. Possibly both. The afternoon drags onward beneath low, heavy clouds. Hammer blows echo constantly across the market square. Your arms burn steadily from lifting, turning, holding, pumping, carrying. Blacksmithing never truly pauses. At one point you simply stand still beside the forge watching sparks drift upward into the damp air, while your body forgets briefly how tired it is allowed to feel. Lift. Strike. Turn. Bellows. Again. The rhythm becomes hypnotic after enough hours. A young stable boy arrives carrying a sack of broken nails and bent horseshoe pieces gathered from muddy roads outside town. Nothing wasted. Never wasted. Edric sorts through the scraps carefully while the boy warms frozen fingers beside the forge. My mother says blacksmith fires keep sickness away, the boy says quietly. Your mother says many things. She burns horseshoe nails under beds during fevers. Edric shrugs. Smoke frightens people less than illness does. The boy nods thoughtfully as though this explains the world completely. Perhaps it does. Late in the afternoon, the clouds finally break enough for pale winter sunlight to spill weakly across the market square. The light catches rising forge smoke and drifting mist together until the whole town seems wrapped in glowing grey cloth. For a brief moment everything softens. The muddy streets, the shouting traders, the aching labour. Even the hammer strikes sound slower somehow. A church procession passes nearby carrying candles beneath embroidered banners darkened by damp weather. Monks chant softly while townsfolk bow heads as they pass. Tiny brass bells ring gently from somewhere within the procession itself. The dog follows them for nearly 30 seconds before returning disappointed by the complete lack of sausages. By evening your hands tremble slightly whenever you lower the hammer. Tiny burns sting across your wrists where sparks found gaps in your sleeves. Soot clings permanently beneath your fingernails now. Edric notices your expression. Tired. You nod. That is apparently the full extent of medieval workplace sympathy. Still, after a moment he hands you warm broth purchased from the onion seller nearby. The steam curls upward beneath the darkening sky while bells ring faintly from somewhere beyond the rooftops. The broth tastes mostly of onion, salt, and survival. Perfect. Around you, market traders begin packing goods against approaching night once more. Lanterns flicker awake beneath awnings. Rain threatens again along the western hills. And beside the glowing forge, while sparks rise softly into the cold evening air, the long, exhausting rhythm of hammer, fire, and iron continues without mercy. By the time darkness settles over the market square again, your body feels borrowed rather than owned. Every muscle aches with the slow, deep exhaustion that comes only from repeated labour beside heat and iron. Even lifting the broth cup earlier required quiet negotiation with your shoulders. Still, the work is not finished. It is never finished. A manor servant arrives just after sunset carrying a lantern and far too much urgency for the hour. His cloak drips rainwater onto the mud while his boots leave deep tracks across the square. Court tomorrow, he announces breathlessly. The steward needs the fittings tonight. Edric closes his eyes briefly. Not in anger, in resignation. The servant unloads a bundle of iron pieces wrapped in oilcloth beside the forged latch bars, chest straps, replacement hinges, and a heavy iron bracket intended for the manor hall doors. Apparently the steward has suddenly remembered several important repairs mere hours before guests arrive. A timeless tradition among wealthy people. You help reload the wagon beneath swaying lantern light while drizzle begins again across the rooftops. The mule looks personally offended by the idea of another journey. The dog climbs into the cart without invitation. No one argues. Soon you leave the noisy market behind and follow the muddy road north toward the manor estate. Lantern light rocks softly across puddles, while cold wind slips through gaps in your cloak. The town fades behind you little by little, until only distant bells and faint forge smoke remain visible in the darkness. Beyond the walls, the countryside feels strangely larger at night. Fields disappear beneath drifting mist. Bare winter trees lean over the road like silent watchers. Somewhere distant, an owl calls once through the damp air. The manor itself finally emerges atop a low rise beyond frozen pastures and muddy hedgerows. Torchlight burns beside the gatehouse, where guards wrapped in wool cloaks stamp cold feet beside braziers. The stone walls glow amber against the darkness, while rain water trickles down old mortar lines. One guard recognizes Edric immediately. Late work again. Broken things ignore sunset. The guard nods as though this sounds deeply philosophical. Inside the manor yard, Servants hurry between buildings carrying baskets, firewood, and covered trays. The place hums with anxious preparation for tomorrow's court gathering. Horses stamp within the stables, lanterns glow behind narrow windows, smoke pours thickly from the great hall chimney into the rainy night. The smell here differs from the market square. Less fish, more wet wool and expensive food. You unload the iron fittings beneath a covered passageway while servants rush past clutching rush bundles meant for the hall floors. Fresh rushes help absorb dirt, spilled ale, and whatever else medieval gatherings inevitably produce beneath heavy boots. Though after several days, even fresh rushes mostly smell of damp feet and old smoke. A steward meets you near the great hall entrance, not the same steward from before, thankfully, but one nearly identical in expression and exhaustion. Manor officials appear manufactured from identical parts somewhere. Hinges first, he says, the west chest lock after. Inside the great hall, warmth strikes you immediately after the cold road. Firelight leaps across timber beams blackened by generations of smoke. Long trestle tables line the room beneath hanging banners faded with age and soot. Servants spread fresh straw mixed with sweet herbs across sections of the floor. Lavender, rosemary, mint, an ambitious attempt to convince everyone this hall does not normally smell like wet dogs and roasted onions. The iron bracket for the main doors lies waiting beside the hearth. Edric sets to work immediately while you hold lanterns and tools nearby. Hammer strikes echo softly through the hall despite the late hour. At the far end of the chamber, scribes arrange wax tablets and parchment rolls for tomorrow's court business. Their fingers move quickly beneath candlelight, while stewards argue quietly over seating arrangements. Manor courts rarely involve dramatic justice despite what wandering storytellers claim. Most disputes concern fences, pigs, debts, grazing rights, missing tools, and whose cow wandered into whose cabbage patch during heavy rain. Though people still approach the proceedings with enormous seriousness. A servant girl nearly collides with you while carrying trenchers stacked to her chin. "Sorry," she whispers before vanishing again into the kitchens. The smell following her is magnificent. Roasted onions, stew, fresh bread, possibly goose. You briefly consider abandoning blacksmithing entirely in favour of haunting manor kitchens for the remainder of winter. Edric notices your distraction. Focus. Tragic. The repaired bracket soon settles firmly into the oak doors with deep, satisfying thuds from the hammer. Nearby servants visibly relax each time another repair finishes. Medieval buildings constantly threaten collapse through damp, cold, neglect, and ordinary human misuse. Keeping large halls functioning requires endless invisible labour from craftsmen nobody notices until something breaks. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval society rests more heavily upon nobles or upon tired people fixing damaged objects in bad weather. The chest lock proves more troublesome. The iron mechanism sticks badly from rust and swollen wood. Edric dismantles it carefully while one nervous steward watches every movement like a man supervising surgery on a beloved relative. "This chest holds tax records," he explains quietly. Edric glances up. "Then perhaps keep it drier." The steward does not laugh. No one around manor accounts ever laughs properly. While the lock pieces warm near the hearth, an old servant woman passes carrying a bundle of dried herbs tied with red thread. She pauses beside the chest and tucks one sprig beneath it discreetly. "For luck," she mutters. Some swear manor records attract bad spirits because they contain too many debts and grudges in one place. Others claim mice fear rosemary blessed during winter feast days. A few insist red thread itself confuses misfortune if tied near locks and doors. Those who tell the tale never fully agree. At last the lock clicks open smoothly once more. The watching steward exhales in relief so dramatic you would think Edric personally rescued the kingdom. Outside the hall windows, rain drifts softly through torchlight while monastery bells sound faintly across the dark countryside. The great hall settles gradually quieter as preparations near completion, and beside the warm hearth, surrounded by oak beams, candle smoke, and the endless small repairs holding medieval life together, the exhausting rhythm of the blacksmith's world carries onward into another rainy night. The manor finally releases you sometime deep into the evening, though the word release feels generous considering you still face a muddy road back through cold rain afterward. The great hall behind you glows warmly through narrow windows while servants continue preparing for tomorrow's court long after you leave. Somewhere inside, someone laughs softly over spilled ale. Outside, winter waits patiently. The mule pulls the wagon downhill through darkness slick with drizzle and mist. Lantern light swings weakly across puddles and frozen wagon ruts. The dog sleeps curled atop a sack of charcoal, completely unbothered by movement, weather, or responsibility. You envy this deeply. Edric says little during the journey. The steady creak of wheels and harness leather fills most of the silence instead. Occasionally distant bells drift through the night air from some unseen chapel or monastery farther across the hills. The roads feel emptier now. Not safer, just emptier. A cold wind moves across the fields carrying the smell of wet earth and wood smoke. Bare trees scratch softly together above the hedgerows. Somewhere out in the darkness, something splashes through marsh water unseen. Fox, Edric mutters. You had been hoping for literally any other explanation. Eventually the lantern glow of the market town appears again through drifting mist. Even at this late hour, the place still breathes with quiet activity. Inns spill dim light into muddy streets. A stable boy carries firewood through the rain. Somewhere a drunk merchant sings sadly to no one in particular. The market square itself has changed since earlier. The daytime crowds vanished hours ago, replaced now by clusters of weary travellers sheltering beneath wagons and awnings. Small cook fires glow between puddles, while cloaked figures warm hands over coals. Horses stand half asleep beneath dripping canvas covers, and near the portable forge, a line of waiting repairs has somehow appeared again. Of course it has. A pilgrim with a cracked lantern hook, a trader needing knife rivets tightened, one exhausted woman clutching a snapped cooking tripod from her travel kit. Broken things travel late too, apparently. Edric merely grunts and relights the forge hotter. You almost admire the forge for its endless appetite. Charcoal disappears into it like offerings to some iron-hungry beast. Sparks rise upward into the damp night air, while rain hisses softly against the awning overhead. The pilgrim steps forward first. He wears a heavy cloak patched many times over and a broad hat pinned with tiny lead badges from distant shrines. Mud coats nearly everything below his knees. A walking staff leans beside him, wrapped with faded ribbons and small bells. Lantern broke near the marsh road, he explains. Lucky only the lantern broke, Edric says. The pilgrim nods seriously. Some swear voices call from the fog there after midnight. Drunk travellers. You always say that. Edric pauses. Because sober travellers go home earlier. The pilgrim actually laughs. A rare success. You hold the lantern hook steady while Edric reheats the bent iron over the forge. Nearby, other travellers wait patiently beneath dripping cloaks, rubbing hands together for warmth. The smell of wet wool, smoke, and horse leather thickens beneath the awning. One trader unwraps smoked fish from cloth and shares pieces around the fire while waiting. Another woman pours weak ale into wooden cups for strangers beside her. Medieval roads make companions of exhausted people quickly. Even now, it is hard to tell whether travellers survive difficult journeys through skill or simply through shared fires and stubborn kindness. Perhaps those are the same thing. The repaired lantern hook soon cools beside the forge while the pilgrim watches sparks rise into darkness. "My grandmother feared blacksmith fires," he says quietly. "Wise woman," Edric mutters. "She said forge sparks attract wandering souls during storms." Edric snorts softly. "Forge sparks attract burned sleeves." Still, after the pilgrim leaves, you notice Edric toss a small pinch of salt into the coals almost absent-mindedly. Perhaps everyone keeps one superstition hidden somewhere. The next traveller brings a hunting knife loose in its handle. Then comes the cooking tripod, one leg twisted badly from rough roads. Then 2 merchants arguing over which of them damaged a wagon latch first. The forge glows steadily through it all. Hammer, bellows, steam, smoke, again. The rhythm grows almost dreamlike in the late hours. Your hands move automatically, now holding tongs, fetching water, turning iron, sorting nails. Exhaustion smooths the edges off everything until the whole world narrows into firelight and steady work. Rainwater drips endlessly from the awning edges into the mud below. Nearby, someone quietly sings an old road ballad beside a cook fire. The melody drifts soft and sleepy through the square while travellers settle beneath blankets and cloaks for the night. A woman wrapped in fur-lined wool approaches near midnight carrying a small iron buckle from her satchel. "Can this wait until morning?" you ask hopefully. She looks at the cracked buckle, then at the rain, then at the road beyond the town gate. "I'd rather not lose my satchel crossing the bridge tomorrow." Fair enough. Edric repairs it without complaint. Well, without verbal complaint. The buckle glows briefly orange in the forge before cooling smooth and solid once more. The woman presses 2 copper coins into Edric's hand and leaves behind a tiny sprig of dried lavender near the anvil for luck. Or gratitude. Or perhaps simply because medieval people leave herbs everywhere. The night deepens further. One by one, travellers finally disappear toward inns, barns, stables, and monastery guest houses. Fires burn lower. Rain softens into mist again. The market square settles quieter beneath drifting smoke and lantern light. At last only the forge remains truly awake. You sit heavily beside the embers while your soaked boots steam faintly in the warmth. Across the square, distant bells ring softly through the fog. The dog sighs in its sleep nearby. The forge crackles low beside you, and under the dim glow of dying coals, surrounded by weary travellers and endless repairs, another exhausting medieval night slowly drifts onward toward dawn. Long after most of the market square falls quiet, the alehouse near the eastern lane still glows warmly through its crooked shutters. Lantern light leaks into the mist while muffled laughter drifts through the rain-soft darkness outside. And eventually, even Master Edric admits the forge can cool for an hour. Only an hour. Perhaps less. You leave the portable coals banked beneath ash while the dog follows closely behind, hopeful in the specific way only creatures familiar with dropped food can be hopeful. Your boots drag heavily through churned mud toward the alehouse door where heat, smoke, and noise spill outward each time someone enters or leaves. The warmth inside strikes like a blanket. Low rafters trap wood smoke overhead beneath soot-black beams shiny with age and grease. Rushes cover the floor thickly enough to soften footsteps, though they also conceal mysteries best left unexplored. The smell here is overwhelming in the most medieval way possible: ale, damp wool, onion stew, smoke, wet leather, roasted fish, and humanity packed together against winter weather. Honestly, the room smells like survival itself. You duck beneath a hanging bundle of dried herbs tied above the doorway, protection charms. Some swear rosemary keeps illness away from crowded alehouses. Others claim juniper frightens troublesome spirits from ale barrels. A few insist the herbs simply hide the smell of travellers. That last theory feels strongest tonight. The room hums with tired conversation. Merchants cluster beside the hearth comparing road conditions. Pilgrims dry socks near the fire despite repeated complaints from everyone nearby. Two drovers argue quietly over sheep prices while an old woman knits beside a candle stub. At the far end, a musician plucks lazily at a lute missing at least one string. The resulting music sounds exhausted but determined, much like everyone else present. Edric claims a rough bench near the wall where iron hooks hold cloaks dripping steadily onto the rushes below. You settle beside him with a groan your back fully deserves. The alewife arrives, carrying thick clay mugs already frothing. "Smith," she nods toward Edric. "Allez! Astounding memory!" She snorts softly and leaves again before either man can continue this clearly ancient conversation ritual. The ale tastes warm and bitter with hints of smoke from the hearth. After hours beside cold rain and forge heat, it feels dangerously comforting. Nearby, trenchers piled with coarse bread and smoked fish travel steadily between tables. The dog stations itself beneath your bench immediately. A veteran professional. Soon bowls of stew arrive as well, cabbage, onion, barley, and scraps of salted meat floating in thick broth. Steam curls upward into the lantern light while everyone nearby falls briefly silent to eat. Even noisy medieval rooms respect hot food in winter. A merchant across the room begins telling a story loudly enough for half the alehouse to hear. "Lantern lights near the marsh again," he announces. Several travellers groan immediately. "Always lantern lights. I saw them myself." "You saw fog." "No," the merchant insists, leaning forward dramatically. "Blue lights, floating above the water." The lute player plucks ominously. A woman near the hearth rolls her eyes. "Last winter you claimed a ghost stole your mule." It wandered off. "Because you drank 3 pitchers." The room chuckles softly. No one can quite agree whether marsh lights are spirits, trapped souls, thieves, or merely strange gases rising from wet ground after dark. Still, travellers avoid those roads at night whenever possible. Even skeptics walk faster there. Edric tears bread apart beside you while listening silently to the stories drifting through the room. His hands remain stained black beneath the fingernails despite washing earlier. Soot becomes permanent eventually for men like him. Across the alehouse, 2 pilgrims display small relic badges collected from distant shrines. One shaped like a scallop shell, another stamped with a saint holding keys. "Protection on the roads," one explains proudly. "Against what someone asks." The pilgrim shrugs. "Everything." "Fair enough." A serving girl moves between tables refilling mugs beneath flickering tallow candles. Their smoky yellow light dances across damp walls and weary faces alike. Somewhere overhead, rain taps softly against warped roof boards. You begin noticing how tired everyone here truly looks. Not dramatic exhaustion, not misery, just the ordinary heaviness of medieval life after long roads, cold weather, and endless labour. Farmers, traders, pilgrims, smiths, stable boys, carters, monks, everyone carrying the day inside their shoulders. The musician near the hearth finally abandons the damaged lute string entirely and shifts into a slower tune better suited for half-sleeping travellers. The melody drifts gently beneath the room's low conversation. The dog receives fish scraps from 3 different tables and immediately decides this is now its permanent residence. Edric notices, "Traitor!" The dog ignores him completely. An old traveller seated nearby suddenly lifts his cup toward Edric. "Smith," he says quietly, "you still throw salt into forge fires." You glance sideways in surprise. Edric chews slowly before answering. "Sometimes. My grandfather did too. For luck. For storms." The old man nods thoughtfully. "They used to say iron fires call lightning less often if fed salt before midnight." Edric shrugs. "Maybe storms dislike bland food." A few nearby travellers laugh softly into their cups. Even now, it is hard to tell which superstitions medieval people truly believe and which simply comfort them during difficult nights beside uncertain roads. Perhaps comfort itself becomes belief after enough winters. The alehouse gradually softens quieter as the hour deepens. Some travellers fall asleep against walls wrapped in cloaks. Others drift upstairs toward rented straw mattresses and wool blankets. The hearth burns lower. Candle flames shrink small and sleepy. Outside, fog thickens across the market square. You finally rise stiffly from the bench beside Edric while the last of the stew warmth fades pleasantly through your chest. The forge still waits outside beneath drifting mist. Repairs still wait too. Always waiting. The dog trots after you reluctantly from the doorway. Behind you, the alehouse door closes softly against the winter night, leaving only faint music, smoke, and sleepy laughter lingering in the damp medieval darkness. The market square feels quieter after the alehouse, though perhaps that is only because warmth and laughter fade quickly once the door closes behind you. Outside, mist presses low against the streets, while the cold settles back into your sleeves and boots immediately. The forge waits beneath the awning exactly as you left it. Patient. Hungry, still faintly glowing beneath the banked coals. The dog circles twice beside the embers before collapsing heavily onto a patch of dry straw near the wagon wheel. Its loyalty appears directly tied to proximity to heat and fish scraps. An understandable philosophy. Edric kneels beside the forge without ceremony and begins stirring fresh charcoal into the coals. Tiny sparks drift upward into the fog-dark square while rainwater drips softly from the awning edges nearby. You almost protest. Almost. But somewhere deep inside the market town, a bell begins ringing urgently. Not alarm bells, workshop bells. The kind summoned when someone important suddenly remembers something broken. Edric sighs through his nose. "Told you," he mutters. A stable boy soon appears at a run through the mist carrying a wrapped lantern, and breathing hard enough to frighten the horse tied nearby. "Need help at the north stables?" he pants, gate latch snapped. Of course it did. Medieval gates possess an extraordinary talent for breaking precisely when weather turns worst and people grow most tired. You follow the boy uphill through narrow streets slick with fog and mud. Lantern light swings wildly ahead, while water drips steadily from roof beams overhead. Most windows remain dark now. Only occasional taverns and watch posts still show signs of wakefulness. The town itself seems half asleep, but not entirely. Somewhere unseen, bakers already prepare morning bread. Monks rise for night prayers. Watchmen stamp frozen feet beside braziers. Sick children cough behind shuttered windows while mothers tend hearth fires low and steady through the dark hours. Medieval nights never truly rest. The north stables sit against the inner wall near a narrow postern gate used by merchants arriving after sunset. Lanterns burn dimly beneath the stable roof where nervous horses stamp and snort clouds of steam into the cold air. The smell here is thick and immediate. Hi! Leather, dung, wet wool, horse sweat. Honestly, it is somehow both terrible and comforting. A stable master meets you beside the broken latch holding half the iron mechanism in one gloved hand. Snapped clean, he mutters. Edric inspects it briefly. Cheap iron. The stable master looks offended. You made it. Edric pauses. Then someone else broke it badly. A fair recovery, honestly. You carry tools inside while horses watch suspiciously from their stalls. One grey gelding attempts to nibble your sleeve. Another kicks the wall simply to express opinions about existence itself. Some swear horses sense spirits before humans do. Others claim stable cats keep demons from entering barns during storms. A few travellers even braid tiny charms into horse manes before dangerous journeys. No one can quite agree whether animals are wise or merely dramatic. The broken latch lies twisted near the gatepost where cold moisture rusted the hinge pin nearly through. Edric sets a small coal pan glowing while you hold lantern light steady against the dripping wood beams overhead. The stablemaster mutters anxiously. Merchants arrive before dawn tomorrow. They usually do. Gate must hold. Then stop slamming it. The repair begins slowly. Hammer taps echo softly through the stable while horses shift restlessly nearby. Steam rises from their backs in the cold air. Somewhere farther down the stalls, a mule produces a noise suggesting profound emotional disappointment. You begin filing the replacement pin while Edric reheats the broken iron pieces. The smell of hot metal mingles strangely with damp hay and horse breath. Outside, fog thickens across the town walls until even nearby lanterns blur into soft golden smudges. The stablemaster watches nervously while rubbing a tiny bronze saint medallion hanging around his neck. For safe journeys, you ask quietly. For calm horses, he replies. A nearby horse immediately bites his sleeve. Saint's trying, he mutters. At last the repaired latch settles properly into place with a deep, satisfying click. The gate swings smoothly again beneath the stable lanterns. The stablemaster visibly relaxes. He pays partly in coin and partly in fresh oatcakes wrapped in cloth still warm from some late-night kitchen fire. The smell nearly makes your knees weak. Warm food after midnight beside a forge feels close to holy. You eat one while walking back downhill through the misty streets beside Edric. The oatcake tastes buttery, dense, and slightly smoky from the ovens. Above the rooftops, clouds finally thin enough to reveal pale moonlight drifting through the fog. Chimneys breathe slow ribbons of smoke into the cold sky. Somewhere distant, monastery bells ring softly for the night office. The sound carries strangely far at this hour. You return to the forge just as a new traveller approaches through the square carrying a broken iron pothook wrapped in cloth. Of course. Edric does not even appear surprised anymore. The traveller apologises repeatedly for the late hour while explaining that his cook fire collapsed beside the south road earlier that evening. Can't boil broth without this, he says miserably. Edric takes the hook. Then you'd better wait. The forge crackles brighter once more. You pump the bellows slowly while the traveller warms frozen hands beside the embers. The dog lifts its head briefly, judges the newcomer harmless, and resumes sleeping immediately. Hammer. Turn. Heat. Again. The rhythm continues endlessly through the night. Your eyelids grow heavier with every spark rising into darkness. The whole market square feels dreamlike now beneath drifting fog and scattered lantern light. Shadows soften, sounds blur gently together. Even the hammer strikes seem farther away somehow. Still the forge glows. Still iron bends beneath careful hands. And deep into the cold medieval night, beside smoke, horses, bells, and drifting mist, the exhausting world of the blacksmith refuses sleep a little longer. Sometime after midnight, the market square finally grows still enough for you to hear individual drops of water falling from the awning edges into the mud below. The rain has stopped entirely now, leaving only drifting fog and a deep damp cold that settles quietly into wood, cloth, and bone alike. The forge burns lower beside you. Not dead, never fully dead, just quieter, like a tired animal breathing in sleep. The traveller with the repaired pothook disappeared long ago into the misty roads beyond town, carrying his small fixed piece of iron like treasure. The square itself now belongs mostly to lantern glow, distant bells, and the occasional snort of half-sleeping horses beneath wagon covers. You sit heavily beside the embers with both hands stretched toward the warmth. Your palms ache. Your shoulders ache. Even your boots seem tired. Across from you, Master Edric sharpens tools slowly against a whetstone while the dog dreams beside the cartwheel, paws twitching faintly. Tiny sparks jump each time steel meets stone. For a long while nobody speaks. The silence feels earned. Above the rooftops, the clouds finally break apart enough to reveal a thin scatter of winter stars. Pale moonlight touches the wet cobbles and wagon rims until the whole square gleams softly silver beneath the mist. The town looks gentler at this hour. Less crowded. Less demanding. The endless daytime noise faded away at last, leaving only the quieter machinery of medieval life turning steadily beneath darkness. Bakers preparing ovens, monks waking for prayers, watchmen pacing walls, stable boys sleeping beside horses for warmth. You hear one distant laugh somewhere across town, then silence again. Edric finally lowers the whetstone. More charcoal tomorrow, he mutters. Tomorrow already feels unfairly close. The forge heat presses warmly against your face while cold air lingers at your back. Your clothes smell permanently of smoke now. Soot darkens every crease of your hands no matter how often you wash them. This, apparently, is what becoming part of the forge feels like. You unwrap the remaining oatcakes from the stablemaster's cloth bundle, while Edric pours weak ale into 2 clay cups. The food has cooled, but the sweetness still lingers pleasantly beneath the smoky taste of the ale. Simple things matter more at night. Warm bread, dry socks, a steady fire, a roof that mostly keeps rain away. Even now, it is hard to tell whether medieval people survived through toughness or merely through learning how to treasure tiny comforts properly. Perhaps that is the same thing. A faint wind stirs across the square, carrying the smell of chimney smoke and damp hay. Nearby lanterns flicker softly beneath the movement. Somewhere unseen, a church bell rings once. Then again. The late hour. The dog lifts its head briefly at the sound before settling deeper into the straw. Edric leans back against the wagon wheel with a slow exhale. Firelight catches the grey beginning to spread through his beard beneath layers of soot. You get used to the tired, he says suddenly. You glance toward him. Do you... He thinks for a moment. No. The honesty feels strangely comforting. He pokes the coals thoughtfully with an iron rod while sparks drift upward into the darkness. My father worked the forge too, he says after a while, and his before him. You try imagining the workshop years earlier and the same bellows, same anvil, same smoke-dark rafters, different hands shaping iron beneath the firelight. Some swear old forges remember every hammer strike ever made within them. Others believe ghosts of dead smiths linger near anvils listening for poor workmanship. A few villages even leave bread beside cold hearths during winter. Feast nights so ancestral spirits will keep workshop fires safe until spring. No one can quite agree which customs are superstition and which are memory-wearing old clothes. The forge settles lower still beside you. Red coals pulse gently beneath soft grey ash. The heat feels sleepy now instead of fierce. Around the market square, travellers shift beneath blankets and wagon covers. A horse stamps once against the cobbles. Somewhere farther off, a baby cries briefly from an upper window before quieting again. The world softens at this hour. Edges blur, voices lower. Even exhaustion becomes quieter. You lean back against a crate listening to the slow breathing crackle of the coals while moonlight glows faintly through the mist overhead. The long day stretches behind you now like one endless road of mud. Sparks, bells, smoke, rain, horses, and hammer blows. And yet somehow tomorrow waits already. Another forge fire, another stack of repairs, another road, another cold dawn. Medieval life rarely pauses long enough for anyone to feel finished. Edric eventually rises stiffly and throws one final shovel of charcoal across the embers before covering part of the forge mouth with iron plate to preserve the heat until morning. The coals glow deeper red beneath the darkness. Banked carefully, sleeping, almost, the dog relocates immediately to the warmest possible stone beside the hearth with impressive accuracy. You spread a rough wool blanket across the straw near the wagon, while distant monastery bells drift faintly through the sleeping town once more. Their sound feels softer now, further away, like something heard through dreams already beginning. The mist thickens gently around the edges of the square. Lantern flames shrink lower. The forge breathes quietly beside you, and beneath the fading warmth of the coals, wrapped in smoke, damp wool, and the slow exhaustion of another medieval night, you finally begin drifting towards sleep. The last thing you remember before sleep takes hold is the sound of the forge settling beside you. Not loud, just the faint shifting crackle of cooling coals beneath ash, like distant footsteps fading slowly through snow. The market square lies almost entirely silent now beneath the drifting fog. Lanterns burn low behind shuttered windows. Horses sleep standing beneath damp blankets. Somewhere high above the rooftops, pale winter stars linger between moving clouds. You wake only briefly sometime before dawn when the monastery bells begin again. Soft at first, then fuller. Their slow iron voices rolling across the sleeping town through mist and chimney smoke alike. The sound feels older than the streets themselves, older than the market, older perhaps even than the forge. Beside you, the dog lifts its head sleepily before settling once more against the warm stones. Edric already stirs nearby beneath his blanket, because blacksmiths seem cursed to awaken moments before the world remembers morning exists. The coals still glow faintly beneath their covering of ash. Alive. Waiting. Always waiting. The cold presses hard against the edges of the square now. Frost gathers silver along wagon rims and cart handles. Thin ice glitters across puddles left by yesterday's rain. The air smells wonderfully clean for the first time in days, washed empty by weather and darkness. You pull the wool blanket tighter around your shoulders while the bells continue sounding through the half-light. Soon the bakers will wake. Then the stable boys. Then the merchants. Then the endless parade of broken things seeking the forge once more. But not yet, for now the world remains quiet enough to breathe with. Edric kneels beside the forge and carefully lifts the iron cover plate. Red light blooms softly upward from the sleeping charcoal beneath. The warmth touches your face immediately, gentle and familiar after so many long hours beside it. He feeds the coal slowly, patiently, like tending some ancient creature too stubborn to ever truly die. Outside the market square, dawn creeps pale and uncertain along the eastern sky. Frosted rooftops emerge from the mist one by one. Smoke begins rising from distant chimneys in thin grey ribbons. Somewhere nearby, a rooster declares victory over the darkness with entirely unreasonable confidence. The dog yawns, A cartwheel creaks somewhere far down the road. Another day approaches, and yet for these few quiet moments before full morning, the forge belongs only to warmth, breathing coals, and stillness. You notice details now that yesterday's labour buried beneath exhaustion. The way frost feathers along the wagon boards, the faint honey scent lingering from monastery candles packed beside the cart, the soft scrape of Edric's boots against stone as he moves around the hearth. Tiny things, ordinary things, the kinds of things people remember later when larger memories fade. Some swear blacksmiths age faster because they spend their lives standing between winter cold and furnace heat. Others believe forge smoke preserves men the way salt preserves meat. Looking at Edric now beneath the pale dawn light, soot still dark along his hands, it becomes difficult to know which story feels more true. Perhaps both. He hands you a small cup of warmed ale without speaking. The drink tastes thin and smoky and wonderfully alive against the cold morning air. Beyond the square, the town slowly stretches awake around you. Doors creak open. Hooves strike frozen ground. Someone curses softly while carrying water buckets across the lane. Farther uphill, monastery bells fade at last into silence again. For a moment, everything simply exists together. The forge, the frost, the smoke, the ache in your shoulders, the warmth in your hands, the dog asleep beside the coals, the endless roads beyond the town walls. You realize then that medieval life rarely offers comfort in grand ways. There are no perfect endings here, no sudden ease waiting around the corner, only small mercies gathered carefully against hard seasons. A dry place to sleep, a repaired wheel, warm broth after midnight, a forge that still burns through winter rain. And somehow, those things become enough. The morning light slowly strengthens until the mist begins lifting from the square in pale drifting ribbons. Traders emerge from wagons wrapped in blankets. Stable boys lead sleepy horses toward water troughs rimmed with ice. Somewhere nearby, fresh bread begins baking again. The smell reaches the square softly. Warm, yeasty, comforting enough to make the entire town feel briefly human. Edric rises stiffly and reaches for the bellows once more. The day begins again, but your own journey tonight finally starts slowing. The sounds soften first. Hammer strikes become distant. Voices blur gently into the cold morning air. The forge glow dims softer behind your eyes. And little by little, the long exhausting rhythm of the blacksmith's world begins drifting farther away. You imagine the market square hours from now bustling once more beneath muddy boots and shouting merchants. You imagine sparks climbing upward into smoky rafters, while horses stamp outside in the winter cold. You imagine monastery bells calling across frosted fields while the forge burns patiently through another endless day. But those things no longer need your attention tonight. Now the fire burns lower. Now the roads grow quiet. Now the bells fade softly into the distance. The wool blanket feels warmer around your shoulders. The straw beneath you settles comfortably at last. And somewhere beside the glowing coals, beneath the drifting smoke and pale winter dawn, the medieval world slowly folds itself into silence. The forge breathes once, then softly again, and you let the darkness close gently around it all.